Hi, I'm Prateek Panchal. I've spent over 15 years in B2B sales across e-services, US staffing, edtech, SaaS, US consulting, and international education. My work has largely lived at the GTM layer, building revenue from scratch, opening new markets, putting together sales teams, and figuring out why some pipelines move and others just sit there looking busy. I have worked with startups that needed their first 10 customers and mid-sized companies that needed to scale what was already working. Different contexts, different challenges. With every organization, new challenges would arise. But there is only a same core problem. How do you consistently convert market opportunity into revenue? And that's the question actually I've been obsessed with for 14 years now. And honestly, I don't think I'm done figuring it out, which is probably I'm still in sales. I actually didn't plan it. Nobody really does. Sales is not a department. It's not a job title. It's the only function in a company where you sit exactly at the intersection of the market and the business. Everything else is internal. Sales is where actually reality hits. Once I understood that, I stopped treating it like a career. I started treating it like a craft. That preparation doesn't mean having answers. It means understanding the room before you open your mouth. In my career, I used to walk into meetings loaded, deck ready, objections handled, closing lines rehearsed. I thought that was preparation. There was a senior guy I watched early on and I learned so many things from him. So actually he would walk into meetings and say almost nothing for the first 30 minutes, just listening and reading the room. And then he would say just one sentence and that reframed the entire conversation. People would physically lean forward. And I spent years trying to understand what that was. It was context. He knew their world better than they expected him to. So when he finally spoke, it landed differently. So I've carried that into every room I walked into since. So most of what gets called sales leader, it isn't. It's micromanagement with a fancier title. It's a manager checking the CRM twice a day, running Monday pipeline reviews nobody believes in, and wondering why the team is disengaged. My real job as a leader was never to monitor people. It was to remove the reasons they couldn't perform. That's it. Just sit with them, understand what is going wrong. When I stopped tracking activity and started asking what's in the way, and everything changed. Not for me, for them. And here's the other thing. One that makes hiring managers very uncomfortable. I never hired for industry experience ever, because sales is a transferable science, and what I believe is curiosity travels and the discipline travels. The ability to build trust under pressure, that travels. What doesn't travel is the assumption that 5 years in the same sector makes someone a better salesperson. I don't believe that. That assumption has cost companies some of their best potential hires. I just refuse to make it. I'll start with the trend I'm most tired of hearing about, which is AI. Not because it isn't real, it is, but because the conversation is almost entirely wrong. AI is not a strategy, it's an accelerant. And right now, it's accelerating bad habits at industrial scale. Teams are sending more outreach with less thought and calling it innovation. And the response rates are falling off a cliff. And people are genuinely surprised. The real trend, no one's talking about, the one that actually matters, is that the buyers has completely outgrown the seller. Your prospect today has done the research, spoken to your existing customers, compared your pricing against 3 competitors, maybe even shortlisted you before you have introduced yourself. And we are still training salespeople to pitch, to present, to handle objections. That playbook was written for a buyer who needed information from you. That buyer doesn't exist anymore. And the salespeople who survive the next 5 years won't be better at pitching. They'll be better at thinking, at reframing, at bringing a perspective that a buyer genuinely hasn't considered. So that's a skill gap nobody is actually addressing these days. So most companies haven't changed their sales process. They have just put AI on top of a broken one. And now the broken process runs faster. The thing that actually needed to change was never the tools, and it was the belief that volume is strategy. That if you send enough emails, messages, follow-ups, something will eventually stick. That people say in sales that sales is all about numbers. The more you call, the more you get. And AI made that belief more expensive to hold because now everyone sends 10 times more outreach, which means everyone's inbox is 10 times more polluted, which means everyone's response rates are collapsing altogether. What changed for me specifically, AI gave me back my research time, hours of it. I use that time to go deeper on fewer accounts or to understand their business before I ever reach out, to have a first conversation that doesn't feel like a first conversation. Not automation, depth. That's the real unlock. I believe signal pollution is the biggest problem that we're tackling right now. Everyone has data. Nobody knows what to do with it. Intent signals, engagement triggers, behavioral patterns, it's all there. And teams are still making gut decisions because none of it connects into a clear picture. The problem is not excess, the problem is interpretation. And this gets harder in international markets. I have worked across multiple territories and different cultures, completely different buying behaviors. The same signal means different things depending on where you are selling. So silence from a US prospect usually means they have moved on. Silence from a Gulf prospect might mean they are your most serious buyer. So just consulting internally before they come back. So data without cultural context is expensive confusion, and that's the problem I'm working on. So there are many tools that I'm using these days. Clay for account intelligence genuinely changed how I build a prospect list. Clay has been helping me to build my prospect list in a very effective manner. I use Apollo for sequencing, but only when there's an actual intent behind it, not spray and pray. Sales Navigator to understand the organization before I speak to anyone in it. HubSpot to keep the pipeline honest. Not optimistic, honest. But I want to say this plainly. Tools don't fix anything. I have seen teams with extraordinary tech stacks consistently underperform because nobody agreed on what they were actually trying to do. The tool just made the confusion more efficient. So get the thinking right first, then automate it, not the other way around. More important, not less, it is very important. And I say that not as nostalgia, as strategy. So when everyone is competing digitally, showing up physically is differentiation. Full stop. I have worked across international markets, different cultures, completely different definitions of what trust even means. And I'll tell you, no email sequence, no perfectly timed LinkedIn message builds what one real conversation in the same room does. So the decision to trust someone with your business is still a deeply human decision. And humans make it differently when they are physically present. That hasn't changed, and it won't. It will never change. One-on-one discussions always have an extra edge over any LinkedIn message, any email.